Hello, and welcome to this All Tech is Human live stream. The topic today, we will be talking about the draft guidance from the Office of Management and Budget on how the federal government should develop, procure, and use AI. So I'm Rebekah Tweed. I'm the Executive Director of All Tech is Human. And in today's live stream, we will have our guest today, Merve Hickok. She'll be joining me momentarily, and we're going to talk about the OMB draft policy on advancing governance, innovation, and risk management for agency use of artificial intelligence. So this was just released, the draft for public comment. So Vice President Kamala Harris announced this the day after President Joe Biden signed an executive order on the safe, secure, and trustworthy development and use of artificial intelligence. So if you are interested in learning more about that executive order, our founder, David Ryan Polgar, sat down last week with All Tech is Human Senior Fellow Renee Cummings. So they discussed the implications of that executive order, and you can find that on All Tech is Human's YouTube channel. So for those who are new to our community, All Tech is Human is a nonprofit. We are based in Manhattan, but we have a global lens and reach spanning over 80 countries. The organization was founded in 2018 by David Ryan Polgar, and we are committed to building and strengthening the responsible technology ecosystem so that we can tackle complex tech and society issues and co-create a tech future that's aligned with the public interest. So we provide opportunities for deeper engagement with this ecosystem through multi-stakeholder convenings and community building. So we have in-person events. At the end of this year, we will have hosted a couple dozen events in New York City and a few key hubs like San Francisco, DC, and London. We do have 3 more events to close out 2023 if you're interested in joining us. So November 15th, we'll be in New York at BetaWorks. We're partnering with Project Liberty. December 5th, we'll be in London at Conway Hall. And our December 14th end of year celebration will be in New York, back at BetaWorks. So we also build community through our many virtual live streams, such as this one. So if you're watching us on LinkedIn right now, please go ahead and say hi in the comments. Let us know where you are tuning in from. And of course, we have a Slack community of over 7,000 people from over 80 countries. And if you have not already joined us, please do. You can find a way to join at alltechishuman.org. So we also provide a deeper understanding of the responsible tech ecosystem through multidisciplinary education. We convene open working groups that gather a couple hundred people across the globe to collaborate on reports on responsible tech issues. And we have our flagship resource that you should check out. It's called the Responsible Tech Guide. We revise it every September, and we just released our 2023 version a month and a half ago. We focus on 5 key subject matter areas, and we provide resources for deeper learning through our knowledge hubs, which you can find on our website. We focus on responsible AI, trust and safety, public interest technology, tech and democracy, and youth tech and well-being. So finally, we provide opportunities for career development within the responsible tech ecosystem through our work to diversify the traditional tech pipeline and to build the responsible tech talent pipeline. So to that end, we have a job board, a responsible tech talent pool and matchmaking service, and a social impact matchmaking platform called Techalo, where we connect technologists with meaningful roles in the nonprofit and government sectors. We have a Responsible Tech University Network, we host Responsible Tech Career Fairs, and we have a Responsible Tech Mentorship Program that over 1,000 people have gone through. So if any of this sounds interesting to you, please check us out at alltechishuman.org. All right, so I am thrilled today to be joined by Merve Hickok. So I'd like to bring Merve up while I introduce her. So for those who don't know, Merve is the President and Research Director at the Center for AI and Digital Policy. She's deeply engaged in global AI policy and regulatory work. The center educates AI policy practitioners and advocates across 80 plus countries, advises international organizations like the European Commission, UNESCO, the Council of Europe, OECD. Merve is a globally renowned expert on AI policy, ethics, and governance. And you can find her work at aiethicist.org and with Center for AI and Digital Policy. So hi, Merve, welcome.
Hi, Rebekah. Nice to be here today.
Yes, thank you so much for joining me. So I'm going to start by giving just a little bit of context for the White House announcing all of these initiatives around AI. It has been a long time coming, and on October 30th, President Biden signed this expansive 100 plus page executive order on the topic, and then the following day, Vice President Kamala Harris was in the United Kingdom delivering this major policy speech on AI at the Global Summit on AI Safety. And she announced a series of new initiatives. And there were 4 main initiatives that she announced. First, the United States AI Safety Institute. So I'm going to briefly just touch on all 4 of these. That'll be a part of NIST, and it will be charged with operationalizing the NIST AI RMF, or the Risk Management Framework. So this is going to deal with testing and red teaming, watermarking and data provenance, algorithmic discrimination and privacy preserving AI, and international research collaboration with the UK version, the AISI, AI Safety Institute in the UK, and then others. And then some workforce and labor issues and a lot more. So it was very comprehensive. Really happy to see that. The second initiative is the draft policy on US government use of AI through the OMB, and we will be dissecting that momentarily. The third is a political declaration on the responsible military use of AI and autonomy. So that will outline specific guidelines for the military around things like autonomous weapons and systems used for national defense. And then the fourth, which we're really excited about, this new funders initiative to advance AI in the public interest. So $200 million has been pledged by 10 different philanthropic organizations to advance AI that's designed and used in the best interest of workers, consumers, communities, and historically marginalized people in the US and around the globe. So that's very exciting. There were also a number of smaller initiatives that we don't need to get into today. But yeah, the first thing I wanted to dive into here with you, Merve, I wanted to talk about that second initiative, the OMB draft guidance, and it has 3 parts. And we'll briefly touch on the first 2 and then get to the meat of mitigating risks, which I think is what everyone's most interested in. So can you start by giving us a sense of that, the first section around policy guidance for strengthening AI governance? So can you talk to us a little about that?
Absolutely. And first and foremost, great to see the executive order coming through. It's been a long time, and it is one of the most extensive executive orders in history. So always good to see the White House and the OSTP team kind of pushing the policy agenda. Having said that, in both the executive order and the OMB, I think there are, they both require significant dissecting of what is in, what is not, what is qualified. So while we're talking about the OMB guidance, I want to kind of highlight that piece first of what is in and what is not, because the devil is always in the detail, right? In terms of the AI governance part of the OMB draft guidance, we see some governance mechanisms that the guidance is requiring each agency to accomplish. So the first one is designating a chief AI officer who would have the responsibility to advise agency and agency's leadership on AI, coordinate, track, and oversee the management and use and development of AI within the agency. And there's a pretty extensive job description in the guidance of, if you're going in for this position, here's what's expecting you. There is also the establishment of an internal mechanism, like an AI governance board in each agency. So you'll have the chief AI officer and then a governance board, which will be multidisciplinary. So there are multiple departments coming together for this board. And then on top of these, so this is within an agency, on top of this, we're also looking at an interagency council for the coordination and recommendation and helping OMB with some guidance and going forward. So this will cut across the agencies. And then the fourth piece is around expanding the AI use cases inventory. So bit of over a year ago, we have seen some of these use cases being published, although with slim detail for some agencies compared to others. Now the guidance is requiring each agency to expand on the details of use cases as well.
Yeah, that's great. So, okay, yeah. And then looking next at that second section, it's about responsible AI innovation and removing unnecessary barriers to the responsible use of AI. Yeah, what stands out to you about that section?
Well, this part is about adopting more AI. How should each agency adopt more AI, but in a responsible way? So increasing that adoption, which also includes generative AI, so not only predictive systems, but also generative AI systems. However, there is also a part where the guidance acknowledges that many agencies do not have currently the necessary AI maturity or the internal talent, which they the looking at as obstacles to adopt more AI. And I would like to highlight the maturity and shortage on skills, internal skill as it's impacting all the sections of this OMB guidance, right? If you don't have good, knowledgeable talent that you have invested in for AI specific challenges, you might not be able to kind of accomplish the other pieces of this guidance. So that internal talent for me is one of the most important things. But interestingly, the barriers where this part of the guidance says remove unnecessary barriers to responsible use of AI, you're looking at the infrastructure, the legacy infrastructure of federal government, which leaves a lot to desire for. Data strategy. Some agencies have data strategy, some don't. This was already an existing work in progress. And again, coming back to the agency's workforce, cybersecurity approvals, etc. So while this part of the guidance pushes for more adoption, there's also a lot of acknowledgement that there's going to be significant investment on infrastructure and humans.
Right. And it takes a lot of time to hire people into the federal government. The process is pretty extensive. So, yeah, I envision that might take a while to get the agency up to the standards with all of the talent that they'll need to bring in. But I'm glad to see that they're working on that.
So it's not like they're starting from scratch. There's been some agencies, some departments rather, who have been leading some of this work in terms of upskilling the internal talent, creating communities of practice, etc. So none of them are starting from scratch, but it is good to see the guidance acknowledging what else needs to happen.
Yeah, definitely. So we can move on to the third section now, the policy guidance around mitigating AI risk. So would love to dig into what's included here and what you like about what you're seeing here, and then what's missing.
Yeah, so first and foremost, the guidance directs the agencies to adopt minimum practices for design, development, and use of AI systems in federal agencies. So before I come into what these minimum requirements are, the word procurement is missing there intentionally because there's a separate piece which does not include all these practices. So again, devil is in the detail, right? Going back to the minimum practices, what the guidance says is before a system is deployed or for the existing systems, each agency should document the intended purpose and expected benefit. quantitatively and qualitatively, which is great, which means that you really have to justify first and foremost why you're bringing this in. Kind of hope that this could be, a good practice against techno-solutionism, because each agency will be held accountable regarding that that justification and intended purpose, and what they put in there will also serve as a baseline. So fast forward 3 years, 5 years, you can say, has this actually improved anything against what you started with this baseline? The second piece is identifying potential risks of using AI, as well as mitigation measures for those you have identified. So we're seeing a lot of risk and impact analysis. Documenting the stakeholders, which not only internally but externally, who might be impacted by the systems. Mind that this is at this point documenting only, right? It's not mandating reaching out for public consultation yet. Assessing the quality and appropriateness of data, which again is a really big ticket item. We see data sets that are not representative, not relevant, that are not recent, just put together and trying in the hopes of creating a solution. So this guidance really, like the minimum practice, really underlines the importance of data quality. And without good data, there is no AI or good, high performing AI. And then it requires the agencies to test the AI for performance in real world context, which again is where many AI systems fall or fail, because internally or externally with the vendors, you see a lot of claims. Our system can do this, can do that. It looks great in a test environment, in a prototype environment, but as soon as it hits real world or starts engaging with real humans in that context, it starts failing. So really expecting the agencies to test this in real world context before they actually deploy the stuff. And then independent evaluation of the impact assessments and the performance, etc. So not only expecting these impact assessments and testing to happen, but expecting an independent evaluation of the results and the documentation for this. And then the rest is, human training, ongoing risk assessments, ongoing monitoring, and providing human alternatives, human considerations if the AI system seems to be creating adverse decisions.
Yeah, there's a lot, and it seems like it will involve a lot of people, which is probably a good thing to bring more people into the process. And in this section as well, they talk a lot about uses of AI that are presumed to impact rights and safety and things like that. Would you want to talk a little bit about what some of those uses are?
Yeah, so if anyone watching has been involved with EU AI Act, so the safety impacting list is very much on critical infrastructure and roads, transportation, etc. And then the rights impacting AI system list or use cases are very similar to EU AI Act's high risk cases. Almost 100% overlap in terms of the high level cases, but the guidance has more detail. So you see law enforcement, border and immigration management, access to work, access to education, access to credit, housing decisions, healthcare decisions, etc. So a very similar list. What it doesn't do in comparison to EU AI Act is we don't see any red line prohibitions in this guidance, in this draft guidance. So my call for anyone watching or anyone interested in submitting public inputs before December 5, because there's an ongoing public consultation process right now, is to call for red line prohibitions. Because you see systems such as predictive policing, biometric categorization, emotion analysis, etc., listed in those rights impacting use cases, but then it is left to each agency to make the determination whether that actually is. And we know that some of these systems are fundamentally in conflict with human and civil rights, or they are pseudoscientific to start with.
Right. Yes, and it sounds like there are some minimum practices for the rights impacting AI, including maintaining options to opt out where practicable. So it's good to see some of those. But yeah, moving on to you mentioned earlier that there is this separation between what the federal government is using and what they are procuring. So within that mitigating risk section, you have this portion that's specifically giving guidance around procurement from third parties. And of course, this is really crucial because a lot of what the federal government will use will be coming in through third parties. So let's talk a little bit about that. What can you tell us about the guidelines around procurement?
Absolutely. So before I jump into the procurement, one clarification, or not clarification, but note. There are also, after the minimum practices, there are also some additional steps where things like conducting public consultation, consulting with affected groups, incorporating their feedback, notifying public about the use of AI, etc., are considered like additional steps. But there's a qualifier. Again, devil is in the detail, where it says as practicable. Yeah. So again, public consultation, working with impacted communities, and creating notifications, etc. These are really important steps for transparency and accountability. And I would be concerned if agencies start making a calculation. It's not practicable. It's not practical. It's not practicable. So we'll skip those steps. So just like
there's a lot of subjectivity in those details.
Exactly. So for going on to the procurement section, what is different is, as I mentioned, all these minimum requirements, minimum practices are laid out as design, development, and use of AI. And then at the very end, you see this procurement piece, and it's not necessarily clear how much of these minimum practices, or what minimum practices, like which ones will be actually incorporated into the procurement. Granted, for US, all the agencies, I think with the exception of intelligence, or there's a separate piece for them, is subject to federal acquisition regulation. So anything that you want to embed in the acquisition regulation, the regulation itself needs to be updated by the council, by the agency, like interagency council. So hopefully we see these requirements and these minimum practices actually become regulation, embedded into the regulation, and not become just nice to haves. And then in terms of the implications of again, another detail, we see mention of procured AI systems. Not in procurement process, right? So the way I'm reading this right now, and would like to see a more clarification as the process moves forward, is that all these minimum practices apply at the stage of procurement. Because what happens is, if you're already doing an impact assessment, a consultation, whether the system is going to work in real world context, etc., after you procure the system is already, you're already making a commitment as a federal agency. Ideally, when you go out for, request for price, request for quotes, etc., when you're starting engaging with vendors, that should be the part in the process, or the step in the process where all this should happen, where the agency, governance board, or maybe an interdisciplinary evaluation team comes through, etc. So we're not necessarily seeing this. To me, it almost reads as apply this to the procured systems after the fact, which might create all sorts of additional problems.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, it looks like some of the requirements that they want is the, promoting competition in procurement of AI, maximizing the value of the data, and then, some requirements around responsibly procuring generative AI. So it's good to see that they want testing and safeguards, including external AI red teaming, watermarking and content provenance. And then agencies are encouraged to consider NIST standards. So that's good to see. And then also the transparency and performance improvement. So the documentation is required through the use of model, data, and system cards. But yeah, I like your point that it makes a big difference if it's if this is happening during the process of procurement or after the federal government has already committed to purchasing something from a third party.
And one more detail maybe, and I would be more than happy if someone has a different idea to reach out to me later, that you're reading this wrong. But so you have the procurement of minimum requirements, and then there's a separate section, as you mentioned, Rebekah, for generative AI systems, right, where it says testing, watermarking, etc. And in there it says application of mandatory minimum risk practices to procure the AI, but it sits under generative AI. So are we talking about applying this to generative AI systems to be procured only, or all the systems? Again, this is more complicated because of the federal acquisition regulations and the process that one needs to go through, the government needs to go through to update that, which is takes time. But that we definitely need more clarity. There's great stuff in this, but we need more clarity.
Yeah, it's an excellent point. I do want to bring in one audience question that we had prior to the live stream. Someone asked, as AI tools are procured to address various functions or processes, how are the original processes being addressed by the government? Will these processes be getting a design and or function update, or staying the same? And if old processes are kept the same, wouldn't an AI tool be adding scale impacts to existing inefficiencies? And she goes on to say, examples of AI vendor failures at state levels are many. So do you have a response to that, Merve?
I do, and following on my what I just mentioned with federal acquisition regulation, these existing processes and regulation needs to be updated for AI specific, challenges and risks and governance methods. Right now, with the federal acquisition regulation, there isn't even a AI category, so there is no artificial intelligence category that a procurement professional can go into the database and pull out all vendors, all systems in the federal government, and then reach out to a fellow procurement professional in another department, say, hey, what was your experience with this vendor or with the system, etc. So
can't really collaborate.
The privacy impact assessment, like the mandated privacy impact assessments, it doesn't necessarily take into account how AI systems can bring together disparate data sets, can provide more granular information about behavior, habits, etc. So there's a lot to be updated in the regulation and with a specific, like AI specific lens. However, there's also the part in the regulation where it says if it is not strictly prohibited in the regulation in FAR, procurement professionals can be more creative, more innovative, and add some extra processes, change some, not change, but depending on their risk tolerance, engage with vendors and systems accordingly. So there is that flexibility, even without changing the regulation. There is still that flexibility where a procurement professional in the federal government can start doing this, or teams can start doing some of these minimum practices. So short story, as you know, we definitely need the regulations to be updated with that lens of AI specific challenges, but that shouldn't preclude the procurement professionals, acquisition professionals from already experimenting with some of these practices. I've interviewed more than 20 professionals in the federal government as well as outside, like Canada, UK, multiple EU countries, etc., on their experience. A lot of what's happening right now is dependent on the individual procurement professional. And kudos to those who are asking more questions, who are pushing the boundaries. There are a lot of those professionals in the federal government that we should talk more about and kind of support.
Yeah, right. And one thing I wanted to do for some in the audience who might be wondering, wanting a little bit of a zoom out, as far as we know that that Congress is working on some potential bills as well, and kind of to talk about the difference between what would be happening in the legislative branch and then this, which is coming through the executive branch. Like, what's the significance of having all of this activity in the executive branch right now?
So executive order is, as you mentioned, comes from the executive branch. It's not legally binding as legislation is on private vendors or private companies. However, it does it does govern the activities of the federal agencies. When we look at President Biden and VP Harris, they both repeatedly asked Congress to come up with a bipartisan AI regulation. Even in the EO announcement last week, President Biden turned around and asked on the spot to Senator Schumer to urgently pass this legislation, bipartisan legislation. So there is definitely that acknowledgement of the need as well as the urgency. But what the EO executive order and the guidance does, even without the legally binding nature of it, is U.S. federal government is the largest buyer in the world by far. So you have this huge power, and that power comes with responsibility, and that power comes with the ability to shape behavior, right? So we can already expect federal agencies during their procurement process, for example, or their vendor engagement, to start expecting these minimum practices, start asking for documentation, more documentation from vendors, start putting clauses, AI-specific clauses in the contracts, which we hope the OMB is going to come up with. So that will eventually, shape some of the behavior of the vendors who would like at least would like to do business with the federal government. So it can have a domino effect as well.
Right. Yeah, that's excellent. So you mentioned a little earlier that this is draft guidance. This is the government is expecting public comments on this, and that CAIDP will be putting some comments out. And you mentioned red lines as one area that you're hoping that people will ask for and demand. Wanted to know a little bit more about the public feedback and comments that your organization is planning to put forward, and are there ways for the public to get involved? Like, how can people watching this live stream participate and get involved?
Definitely. So one of the things that we do at CAIDP is this work called Public Voice. It is one of our main activities. So if anyone watching now or later, if you go to caidp.org and look at the Public Voice website, and then there are several specific ones. The OMB guidance has its own page. But what we try to do is try to find with our alumni network all these public input opportunities from around the world, not only US, but from around the world, and then share those, amplify those opportunities, provide some guidance, some pointers, and get more people involved in this public consultation process so we can amplify more voices. Doesn't necessarily mean that voices that are aligned with us. We just want this to be a more democratic, inclusive process. So for the OMB guidance, we already have a page out with the details, what the guidance suggests, what we're looking at, and some historical background on it. And things that we are looking to comment on are definitely the red lines, waivers. So what I didn't mention yet is in each agency, chief AI officer to be, or future chief AI officers, they will have the authority to grant waivers for certain uses, not certain, for AI use cases within their agencies. So it's almost like self-conformity, self-assessment that you see in the EU AI Act. You got the agency head, or like chief AI officer rather, looking at all the documents, the justification, the risk impact, etc., and then saying, okay, I waive this. We don't need to do anything further about this. You can see how big of a loophole that is, right?
Yeah.
The guidance suggests that if there's a waiver, or if there's an, I'll come to the extensions in a second. If there's a waiver, that waiver should also be included in the AI use cases that are already shared in AI.gov. So you can see, existing systems and waived systems. But again, devil is in the detail. How much detail is going to be provided for each waived system? How can public keep government accountable? We will see. So again, if you're providing public consultation, ask for removal of that loophole to start with. And because that can create all sorts of exceptions and exclusions. The other one that we're going to comment on is there's a termination obligation. So each agency is required to look at what they're planning to, what kind of AI systems they're currently using, and then apply the minimum requirements, minimum risk requirements. And if they cannot mitigate the risk, they are supposed to terminate that AI system you use by August so by next summer,
Mm-hmm.
or ask for extension or ask for waiver. So again, we need to see who terminates, who's asking for waivers, what are the details of that waiver, because if I'm reading this correctly, the waiver also can be indefinite. So once you get the waiver, it's you don't need to go back unless there's a significant change in the system. Or if asking for extension because they weren't able to mitigate all the risks that I identified by August. So again, really depending on this community of AI practitioners, civil society, AI ethics folks to keep an eye on this. But also, if asked, work with the federal agencies. Like I said, there's a lot of talent shortage. There are amazing people trying to do good work within the agencies, within the departments. So, opening up those communication channels as well. Like, how can the community, academic researchers or civil society community, can help you to meet these obligations? And then, like I said, the other pieces are what I already mentioned, the procurement regulations. And we'll be asking for some sort of public incident reporting.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So this is a commitment that U.S., not commitment, but something that U.S. is already working in, like in OECD. Mm-hmm. So it will be ideal that the AI use case inventory also had accompanying incident reporting. And then the last piece is data purchases. Agencies should be prohibited from purchasing commercially available data directly or through vendors if that data requires a warrant from a judge in the first place. So, closing loopholes in procurement and vendor relationships.
Excellent. Yeah. Thank you so much, Merve. I do want to put a plug in for CAIDP's website. They have so many excellent resources around tech policy, AI policy. So please check out that website. Also check out alltechishuman.org. Find ways to get more involved in the community and in both of our organizations. So Merve, I want to thank you so much for joining me today to discuss and to get granular on this really important topic that is, I'm so glad that we are all able to comment on this. And thank you for illuminating all of the kind of nooks and crannies of what those details are that are so crucial, like you said. So thanks everyone for joining us today.
Thank you, Rebekah, and thank you everyone for watching. Thank you. Have a good day.